Some of the most grounded people you will ever meet are almost invisible online. They don't announce their mornings. They don't document their meals. They don't explain their feelings in captions or measure their worth in reactions. In a world that never stops sharing, that kind of silence feels unusual, almost unsettling. We're surrounded by proof of life everywhere we look. Faces, voices, updates, opinions, carefully edited moments telling us who people are, or at least who they want to be seen as. So when someone chooses not to participate, the instinct is to assume something is missing, that they're shy, detached, afraid of being judged, or simply falling behind. But what if the opposite is true? What if silence, for some people, is not absence at all, but clarity? We live in the most connected era in human history, yet never before have so many people felt the need to constantly prove that they exist. Social media didn't just give us a way to share our lives. It quietly reshaped how we experienced them. Moments stopped being something we fully lived and started becoming something we captured. We began asking how things looked instead of how they felt, and without noticing, performance slowly replaced presence. At first, it feels harmless, even exciting. Sharing brings attention. Attention brings validation. Validation brings a sense of belonging. Every like, every comment, every small signal of approval releases a subtle rush in the brain. Dopamine, the chemical of reward, the same system involved in habits and addiction. Over time, the brain learns something dangerous. That visibility equals value. That being seen means being enough. And that's where something begins to shift. You stop living for the moment and start living for the response. You start editing yourself in real time. Your happiness feels quieter when it's not noticed. Your pain feels heavier when it's not acknowledged. Psychologists call this self-presentational pressure. The feeling that you are always being observed, even when you're alone. An invisible audience that never leaves. And for many people, carrying that awareness every day becomes exhausting. Not all at once. Slowly, subtly, until one day, they feel disconnected from their own life. That's often when the silence begins. Not dramatically, not with an announcement, just a gradual withdrawal. Fewer posts, then none at all. For these people, stepping back isn't rejection. It's self-preservation. They begin to realize that every time they share something meaningful, a part of it stops belonging to them. Once a moment is posted, it becomes open to interpretation, to judgment, to comparison, to being misunderstood. And some experiences are too personal for that. Growth, grief, healing, transformation. These things rarely happen in ways that look good on a screen. They happen quietly, privately, in ways that don't translate into content. So instead of explaining themselves, they choose stillness. People who don't post often develop a deeper relationship with their inner world. They spend more time thinking than broadcasting, more time observing than reacting. They notice patterns others miss. The shift in someone's voice, the pause before a difficult truth, the difference between what's said and what's meant, because they're not distracted by documenting the moment. They're fully present inside it, and presence changes how life feels. Time slows down, conversations feel heavier, silence becomes comfortable instead of awkward. They begin to experience moments without splitting their attention between living and recording. They laugh without thinking about sharing it. They walk without reaching for their phone. They sit with their emotions instead of packaging them. And while this may look like withdrawal from the outside, internally it often feels like coming home. There's a psychological concept called internal locus of control. It refers to people whose sense of worth and direction comes from within, rather than external approval. These individuals don't rely on constant feedback to feel secure in who they are. And interestingly, they're often the ones who feel the least pressure to perform online. Their identity isn't built through reactions. It's built through reflection. That doesn't mean their lives are simpler. In fact, they often feel things more deeply. Without distraction, emotions don't get diluted. Joy is quieter, but richer. Pain is heavier, but more honest. They experience life raw, unfiltered, without captions to soften it. And yes, sometimes that intensity is uncomfortable, but it's also real. Of course, not all silence is peaceful. For some, silence comes after emotional burnout, after years of comparison, of watching everyone else's highlight reel, while privately struggling through unfinished chapters. Even when you know social media is curated, the brain still compares. And over time, that comparison creates a subtle erosion of self-worth. You start questioning your pace, your progress, your life. So some people step away not because they're strong, but because they're tired. Tired of feeling behind. Tired of proving happiness. Tired of explaining themselves. And in that withdrawal, something unexpected happens. The noise fades. The constant stimulation quiets. And slowly, they begin to hear their own thoughts again. Desires that were buried under trends. Values drowned out by opinions. A sense of direction that doesn't come from what's popular, but from what feels right. Relationships change too. When you stop posting, you stop broadcasting your availability. You find out who checks in without reminders, who reaches out without updates, who remembers you when there's nothing new to see. Connections become fewer, but deeper, less visible, but more sincere. You trade digital closeness for real presence. And that kind of connection feels heavier, warmer, more human. There's something quietly philosophical about choosing to be unseen. In a culture obsessed with attention, it's a refusal to be reduced to a profile. A reminder that existence doesn't need witnesses to be valid. That meaning doesn't require applause. Ironically, the people who live this way often have the most to say. But they save their stories for moments that matter. Across a table, during a walk, in shared silence. Because to them, real connection isn't measured in engagement. It's felt. Privacy, psychologists say, is essential for identity formation. Without it, the self becomes fragmented. When every thought is shared, there's no space to integrate experience. But in silence, identity solidifies. You begin to know who you are, even when nobody's watching. And that knowledge brings a quiet confidence. Not loud, not performative, just steady. Some people will never understand this choice. They'll ask why you disappeared, why you don't post anymore. They'll joke that if it wasn't shared, it didn't happen. But the truth is, the moments that shape you most rarely make it online. The nights you survived, the lessons you learned quietly, the growth no one clapped for. Those moments live inside you, not on a feed. And maybe that's what the quiet ones understand best. That visibility is not the same as value. That being unseen doesn't mean being insignificant. That a meaningful life doesn't need proof. In the end, we're not meant to be performances. We're meant to be people. And some people choose to live deeply instead of loudly. They choose presence over perception, wholeness over highlights, silence over spectacle. And in a world constantly demanding to be seen, that choice isn't weakness, it's freedom. And here's the part most people don't talk about. When you stop posting, life doesn't suddenly become easier. There are moments when silence feels heavy, when you wonder if being unseen means being forgotten. If everyone else is moving forward, while you're standing still. There are nights when you question your choice, when you open an app out of habit, scroll for a moment, then close it again. And in that quiet, a strange discomfort appears. Because when there's no audience, there's no applause, no confirmation, no instant reassurance that you matter. And that's the moment most people run back. But some people stay. They sit in that discomfort long enough to realize something important, that their worth didn't disappear just because nobody was watching, that the silence didn't erase them. It revealed them. They begin to notice something subtle. Their thoughts become clearer. Their emotions feel more honest. Their sense of direction starts coming from inside, instead of from reactions on a screen. And that's when the question changes. It's no longer, why am I not being seen? It becomes, who am I when no one is looking? That question has no caption, no filter, no shortcut. And once you start asking it, you can't go back to performing. Because being seen by everyone is easy. Being honest with yourself is not. So maybe the people who don't post aren't missing out. Maybe they're standing at the one place most people are too distracted to reach. And if you've listened this far, if any of this felt uncomfortably familiar, then maybe this silence isn't about them at all. Maybe it's something in you that's been waiting to be heard.